Okay, we're on.
Welcome everyone to our discussion of Bertfunos. We're in the really conclusive chapter of the main portion of the Sefer. We'll finish Bezat Hashem next week. But what we're going to do this week is just, as we always start with a little review, and then we're going to do some online interactive learning together. Okay, we're going to go through our same Baba Kama, and we'll throw the microphone over to people in the audience, and we'll see if we can make the Sefer come alive by actually applying the principles that we've been using. Okay, the beginning of our class, we like to do a little review. The Darkei Gemara, as I charted out here, has two major parts, and that's the Chelkei Masa Matan. Are we dealing with questions, answers, statements, questions, answers, difficulties, resolutions, proofs or disproofs? That's the main work of functions of statements. Then in the Pulas HaSeichel, which all these activities are based on, the Ramchal teaches us, we have three activities. That's understanding how statements work with our 11 types of predicates and 3 types of subjects. Then we have our 5 different types of hekashin. And finally, we studied how to prove, or better yet, what is the foundation of proof when it comes to accepting ideas or rejecting them. In this last chapter, the Ramchal outlines his approach, the Seder of Limud. And he tells us, first of all, one has to understand the Lashon of Mechaber. In the Talmud, that means a very brief and very deep language is being used, so we're going to have to spell out all the steps. So the first thing you have to do, though, is understand how the Mechaber, or how the person who is writing or expressing his ideas is expressing those thoughts. And then the essential chiddush of the book is, no matter how a person says what he has to say, he must be talking about a subject and saying something about it. So our job is to clearly identify what subject is being spoken about and what is being said about that subject. And that's really the first abstraction that the Ramchal tells us to do. After we understand the subject and what its predication is, then we have to understand what is its function. Okay, I understand what you're saying now, very good, but what are you trying to do? Are you trying to make a statement? Are you trying to ask me a question? Are you responding to my questions? You have a difficulty in what I'm saying. So the second thing that you have to do is understand the function of what the statement is doing. Finally, he tells us that every statement has to have a proof. And the problem is that those proofs can be quite extensive. Our job is to get to the rock bottom proof, which is what he calls these muskalos rishonos, these basic principles, which either come from physical perception or from intellectual perception. But our job is to go all through the stages of the syllogisms, if there are a lot of them, to get down to rock bottom. And then he tells us to go backwards, start with the rock bottom level and proceed up to the statement we've gotten to. Along the way, we may have problems in creating that logic tree, and he warns us about it. He tells us in step number 6, for instance, that be aware that sometimes you have a statement and explanation. It's not a new move in the Gemara or in the composition that you're trying to analyze. It's really just a restatement of what is known and a clarification. In number 7, he told us, in number 8, he said, watch out for synonymous terms. This is a big problem where mistakes creep in, where people think that we're talking about the same topic, and lo and behold, we're using the same words, but they have different references. In certain statement in section number 9, he tells us that functions of statements are a little more complex than the basic 7 and those subcategories, because sometimes you have combinations, and that's what we'll be discussing today. Sometimes you can have a memra of a person who is retelling the statement, that's agada, of retelling a kasha that another person would have had. We'll be discussing that today. And finally, he says, after you've got your whole logic tree, go through it and make sure that all the steps are actually there. The last part is to do a recap, again, even after you have the whole thing. And if you find things that don't make sense, you should figure out why they don't make sense, because we're dealing here with people who are sensible, so you must have missed something. That's the basic format of his study. What we have to focus on really is that we have to always translate what's being said into subject-predicate. We have to then understand what is its function, and then we're going to have to fill out all the steps. Okay. Let's go to where we were holding. I'm going to say this little piece over again. Okay. Okay. He told us here that so we said that in this step we have to analyze, after we strip the statement into its real meaning, that subject and the predicate, we have to decide what it's doing here. And he's going to warn us that I told you that above. Sometimes you can have one statement serving two functions. For instance, let's say you have a proof being brought to a statement. The proof comes because a person is bringing it in the name of someone else or in an activity that happened to someone else. So it's not in the first person. It's a retelling, but it's a retelling which is a proof. So that's a compound function. It's called a hochacha. That's mugedes. That's brought not in the name of the person who is debating the issue, but by someone else who's bringing that person. So we see when this happens, you have two parts of the debate that are actually combined. You have a hochacha, a proof, and the haggadah, the one who's saying it over. Why? Because the person who is presenting the statement is proving it by way of a retelling of someone else's ma'aseh, of someone else's statement. So he says, first you have to decide how a statement is being brought, and then you have to go into the etzem proof itself, the proof itself. Pirush. How is this statement a proper proof to the statement that it's trying to prove? And later on, and of course, not necessary. In other words, is the person who brought the hochacha, is that valid? Did he bring a valid statement from this person who he's quoting? And then you go into the actual proof itself. How did it accomplish that? And he says a couple of variations. שתססר הוכחה ויקשה לה, ולא נזה יקשה לגדה. It's the first possibility is that you can actually bring all types of kashas or actually destroy the proof, but you're not denying the fact that it really happened. You're just saying it's not applicable to our case. The Maisa really happened. The person really said it, but it has nothing to do with that case. Okay? All you're saying is that this statement, wonderful, I agree with it, but it's not a good proof to what we're trying to prove. That's the first possibility. Sometimes, let's say, just use the case of the Gemara will actually say that that Maisa never happened, or it happened differently than you thought it happened. Okay, so he'll destroy the event. Again, he will destroy the Haggadah and say it never happened, but he could agree with you. In other words, I agree with your statement. I'm not arguing with your statement. I'm just saying that this Haggadah was never said the way you said it was. So I'm not trying to fight your statement. I'm not against you and trying to disprove your contention that this statement is true. I'm saying that this proof is never really happened. And the third possibility, the third possibility is he says the proof is a great proof. It's a very good proof, but the person said it's a good proof, but I just have little problems with it. Not that I'm going to knock it out. There's a little difficulties I have with the words or how or some part of the statement, but I'm not trying to destroy either the reality that this person said it or it's a good proof. So what he's trying to warn us here for is when you have a complex issue, like a person bringing the proof to a statement from another person. So you always have to separate the proof and the retelling. The retelling of the tale can be true, cannot be true. And whether it's a good proof is another story. So you have to separate the two things and make sure that the attack that you're going to have or anyone else is using, you have to understand where the attack is. Is it saying that the Maisa never happened? Or is it saying, yes, it did happen, but it's no proof? Or is it saying, I have little problems with the Maisa, but after we solve those problems, we'll keep the proof in place. Okay, that's the first example of his complex or multiple, let's say, multiple parts of the give and take. Now he's going to give us this other example. It's a mouthful. But what he's saying is another possibility of a multiple functional statement is when one chacham is going to explain some taina, some claim that he felt that this other chacham held. The other chacham is not talking the first person. It's someone who is saying over what he thinks the other person felt. He's mind reading or he's reconstructing the thoughts of another person. V'hine yaskir hakushahi shehukshus lefi dato shel chacham bal hamayma. He will explain to you what was the kasha that this person had. I mentioned one time someone wrote a book, What's Bothering Rashi? He's trying to explain to you what problems Rashi had that forced him to say what he said. So this type of move is called the tikrazos kusha mugedes. It's called a kasha that's being reconstructed by another party, but not the original party. Ki eno kusha yaksha oso chacham al marma chavero. He's not asking a kasha against his friend, the statement of his friend. He's trying to explain to you what difficulties his friend had. So in this book, What's Bothering Rashi, he's not trying to ask a kasha on Rashi. He's trying to explain to you the problems that Rashi had that led him to say what he said. Clear? Okay. The importance of these multiple tasks is that you split them apart and then you see where your difficulties lie. Are you, a lot of times in learning, you'll say to someone, do you have your difficulty on me or on Rashi? I'm only saying over what he said. Are you saying I'm not saying what Rashi said clearly or accurately? Or are you disagreeing with Rashi? And that's very, very important that you locate the source of a person's difficulty. So he has a few variations here in the Kushim Geddes. Okay, 4 of them. So he says like this. וכבר יקרה שעושה חכם עצמו שהגיד הקושיה לא יסכים בו. The person who is retelling the difficulty of the other chacham, maybe he doesn't think it's a difficulty at all. Is that clear? So I wrote here in English. That's what he thinks is difficult, says the Maggid. But the reconstructor, me, I don't think it's difficult at all. Okay, so you have to be very clear. The person who's reconstructing the argument may not have that kasha, but he says, according to my opponent or this other person, he should have that kasha. Okay, so that's one possibility where the Maggid himself, is telling you what the other person, the difficulty of the other person, but he himself doesn't have that problem at all. It only exists on the other person's camp. Second possibility, ve'efsher shemakshan echad yakshe al Maggid al hagadaso. It could be that someone is attacking now the Maggid. She'yir elo hiyos bilti efsher shabal hamama yakavin lamasha chashav lo. And he says, Mr. Maggid, you're trying to tell me a difficulty that Mr. X had? Well, the difficulty that you're trying to tell me is not a difficulty Mr. X could have had. Okay? She'yir lo hiyos bilti efsher shabal hamama yakavin lamasha chashav hu. No, what you're reconstructing as a kasha that this rabbi had, not a kasha at all. The lo mitnei zeh yisose kushaso eli yisose hagadaso. The kasha may be a very good kasha, but it's not the kasha that this person had. Okay, so I wrote here in English that it's a good difficulty, the one that this person who's reconstructing is bringing, but the Baal HaMamra that we're trying to explain would never have had such a difficulty that you're trying to describe to him. Okay, so that's the second variation, where he's attacking the Maggid and saying, it's a wonderful kasha you have, but it's not the kasha that the original Baal HaMamra had. Third possibility, ve'efsher sheyaksha maksha al hakusha atzmo shehigid hamager v'yisoser oso. The other possibility is, that's a very good kasha, and I agree with it, but you know something? I don't have such a kasha. I think this kasha is no kasha. So here, he's not arguing with the original, excuse me, here he's saying the original Baal HaMamra does have your kasha, but I, who have a different shita, don't have that kasha at all. So I agree that he had this difficulty, but I, the third party here in the situation, don't think it's a difficulty at all. So I'm not the Maggid talking, who's saying it's not a difficulty. I'm outside the story, and I'm saying what the Maggid brought up as a kasha according to what I think is not a kasha at all. And the fourth possibility, v'chein efsher sheyakshe hagada o hakusha v'lo mipnei zeh yikanes atzmo b'mamar echad lo la'amto v'lo l'kosvo. The last possibility is that someone could have kashas on the hagada or on the original or the kasha that's being reconstructed, and he's not really saying that the statement is true and false. He just has problems that he wants to be solved, just like the last thing we said in Halacha. He has a few kashas that he would, in the language or how it's presented or certain parts of it don't seem to be accurate, but he's not involved in whether the Magid has a good sheet or not sheet, or whether the kasha is a good kasha or bad kasha. He just has problems with either the Haggadah or the kasha being presented, but he's not asking the steer. So I wrote here, I have difficulty with your ascription, to ascribe the kasha to someone else, or the kasha that you ascribed, but I'm not taking sides in the argument. The statement could be true, could not be true. I'd just like you to clarify some of the points. Okay, these are subtle points in multiple functions, but one has to be very clear what's going on, either when you're asking a kasha or when someone else is asking a kasha. What exactly is it that you find difficult? The retelling or something in the kasha itself? Okay, now he's going to give us a little example. Valkaints, if we first summarize this, here we say, Valkaints are shizbonen me'od lahavdil ben ma sheyomer ha'omer midas atzmo uben ma sheyagid magid mizulaso. You always have to be very careful and pinpoint what the person said in his own name, the original person who said the statement, and what someone else is telling you what he felt, because that's a reconstruction. And the reconstruction could be good and bad. You can have kashas on the reconstruction, you can have kashas on the original statement, but you have to know what is being attacked. Okay, here's this little example. He brings an example from Baba Kama taken Lamed Aleph. So we said like this, the following. There's a Mishnah that says, Hacholvel b'chavaro chayav alav mishum chamisha devorim. Okay, a person who damages his friend has to pay 5 things. What are they? Benezik, betzah, beripud, beshevis, ubeboshis. Okay, 5 things. We're interested in the first one called nezek. Say the person damages someone else, Rahmanas, he cuts his finger or something, it doesn't come back. What does he have to pay? So the Mishnah continues and says, if it's simes no, kateya es yado, or shiva es raglo, if he blinds an eye, or if he cuts off his hand, or if he breaks his leg, roan also ki'ilu hu eved nimka b'shuk. The din is you evaluate him according to what the price of a eved you would buy in the shuk. What does that mean? V'shamin kama haya yafeh v'kama hu yafeh. How much would you pay for an eved with this damage and without the damage subtracted, and that's the nezek you have to pay to the person who was damaged. Okay, that's what the Mishnah says. Basically what we have here is that the pasuk, although it says ayin tachas ayin, an eye for an eye, tooth for tooth, does not mean literal retribution. If he cuts off someone's hand, you have to cut his hand off. The Mishnah is coming to tell us, no, we evaluate everything in terms of money, and the person who did the damage, the mazik, has to pay the monetary value. The question is, how do we know that? Because the pasuk seems to say that there's physical retribution. So we have a brisa that the Gemara brings, and the brisa says the following: Maka adam umaka behema. It makes a hekesh between the injury of a man and the injury of a behema. Ma maka behema l'tashlumin, just like when a man damages an animal, he has to pay for the damage he did. So af maka adam l'tashlumin. So too, when a man damages another man, he has to pay l'tashlumin. So here in my little diagram, I have the mazik, who's an adam mazik, and the object of his damage, which is a behema, and that pasuk is given that he has to pay with mama. Okay, tashlumin. The brisa wants to say we're going to make a mamatzinu between the two. Actually, it's going to be a gzeir sekasa, because, I mean, a gzeir shava, because The two cases are not analogous, but it doesn't matter. Adam hamazik. Adam hamazik, we said, when an Adam hamazik is damaging another man, he pays with mammon. So we're going to learn the case of, it's not true, it's really mammon. We're going to learn the case of Adam, who damages another man, from the case of an Adam who damages a behemoth. Okay? That's not a Gzerah, I'm sorry. Which are going to learn a mammon. Just like a man who damages a behemoth pays with money, which is a given, we're going to derive that a man that damages another man, as in our Mishnah, also has to pay with money. Then the Brisa gives an alternative limud, not from this Mamatzinu, and says, Harihu Omer. There's a pasuk that says, Lo tikahu kofel nefesh rotzeach asher hu rasha lamus. Don't take kofar, don't take any monetary compensation for the person who murders another person. And the Brisa makes a deal. L'nefesh rotzeach yatalokeach kofar. For a man who kills another man, you don't take kofar, monetary compensation. Ela atalokeach kofar l'roshei averem shein chosrin. But you do take kofar, monetary payment, for the limbs of a person that do not grow back. Okay, so we have in front of us a brisa that brings two ways to learn the case of a man damaging another man. One is a mamatzinu from the case of man damaging a behemoth, and the other one is a Gzeras HaKasav. The Gzeras HaKasav says that you do not take money for murder, but by implication, you do take money for damage when a man damages another man. Okay. Whenever we have two proofs, we always ask, why do we need the second proof? I mean, if the first proof was sufficient, so why do we have to bring a second proof? There must have been some weakness in the first proof that brought us to bring us to the second proof. What's wrong with that mamatzinu? So the Gemara says, asks exactly that question. Umay im nafshecha lomar. Okay, what is this second proof? Needed. Why is it needed? And the Gemara answers, Su kor kasha latana. This is what was difficult with the first proof to the Tana of the Brisa that forced into the second proof. This is the example of Kushmageddis, correct? It's the Gemara reconstructing the kasha that the Tana had with the first proof that forced him to bring the second proof. So it's not the Tana speaking himself. He says very little. He just brings the two proofs. It's the Gemara reconstructing that difficulty that forced him to say the second proof. So we're looking for some sort of weakness in the first proof. So the Gemara brings it. The Gemara says, My chazis, the yalfas mi maka behema, leiliv mi maka adam. That is the kasha that the Tana had, and that's the kasha mugeddis. Why did the Tana learn from the case of an Adam damaging a behemoth, where the payment for the damage is mammon? Why shouldn't you learn from the case of Rotzeach, where the man who killed another man is chayav misa? So that's what was bothering the Tana. The Tana felt, wait a minute, I just told you you're going to learn the case of man damaging another man from the case of animal. But I know you're going to think in the back of your head, that's a weak proof. Why did I learn from the case of man damaging an animal? Why did I learn from man damaging another man? Okay, my chas is the yolef mi maka behema, yolef mi maka adam. That bothered the Tana. And that's why he had to come to the second proof. Let's spell that out so we don't get lost, okay? Here we have, yeah, please.
how do we immediately know before we even started the Umay im Nashach Loimer that it was first of all, is it a Shaila or it's a Kasha? It's a Shaila, Mistama, no?
That's the Kiddush of, excuse me, which is the Shiloh? Umana Shachaloma?
No, the question of Umay im Nashach Loimer, that's a Shaila or it's a Kasha?
That, oh, very good. It's a Shiloh, but what is it a Shiloh about?
Right, no, I understand. It's a Shaila about what.
It's 100% a Shiloh, correct.
That bothered the Tana.
It's, excuse me? I didn't hear that.
It's a Shaila, what was the Kasha that was bothering the Tana?
100%. 100%.
But is it true that generally my always is a Shaila?
I can't tell you a general rule.
Okay.
If I were Shas Cohen, I could do it. I can't.
Okay.
In right here, though, it's definitely is a question. And the question is exactly what you said. What was bothering the Tana that forced into the second proof? But we are now going to have the Kusha Mageddis. The Kusha Mageddis is going to be that tshuva, right? That tshuva to the Shiloh is going to be the kasha that bothered the Tana.
Right.
Wonderful. I'm very glad you said what you said. And you see, because we can get multiple levels of the Chelkei Mas Mata.
Right.
Okay. Very good. So what was bothering the Tana? We have to have a tshuva. So what was bothering the Tana was that we shouldn't learn the case of man damaging another man from the case of man damaging another animal. We should learn the case of man damaging man from the case of man damaging man. Okay? So here I made a little chart so we shouldn't get confused, because it's very easy to get confused. Here's the case of Adam Amazik Bahema. We said that case, it's going to be Mammon, correct? And here's the case of Adam Harotzeach. In that case, we're going to kill the Rotzeach. It's Misa. So those are the two given cases that we have in the Chumash Meforish. Now we want to know the unknown case, which is Adam who is going to damage a man. Now, where do we learn it from? If we're going to learn it from this case of man damaging an animal, we're going to get money as the conclusion. If we're going to learn it from Misa, then we're going to have to do a physical retribution. We won't kill the man, but we'll kill that Ava that he killed. Ayin, Tachas, Ayin. Okay? So what was bothering the turn of the Brisa was the possibility that we wouldn't learn from money, but that we could learn from man. So now, look what happens here. The Gemara says, Amre. Amre. Dana Nezikin mi Nezikin, ve'ein Dana Nezikin mi Misa. The Gemara says, wait a minute, let's learn Nezikin from Nezikin. How could you say that the Tana was bothered with learning Nezikin from Misa? So here the Gemara is exactly what the Rambam is trying to show us. The Gemara now is chiming in, and it is asking a kasha on the Magid. The Magid said, you know what's bothering the Tana of the Brisa? He felt that you might have learned the case, our case of Adam Amazik Adam, from the case of Rotzeach. So the makshan here is makshan on the tshuva that was just presented. And he says, wait a minute, how could you possibly do that? It's obvious that we have to learn our case, which is the case of Nezikin, from the case of Nezikin. And we couldn't learn our case from the case of murder. They're totally not analogous. So that's a kasha on the kasha mugeddis, if you're with me, okay? Because they're saying there's no possibility to learn from Rotzeach. The obvious possibility is to learn Nezikin from Nezikin. So that's a kasha on the reconstructed kasha that was presented. What is the resolution of that difficulty? Adarabba, says the Tarzan, to defend his position that that was the correct kasha of the Tana. Adarabba, danan adam me adam, ve'ein danan adam me behema. No, just the opposite. It's more logical to learn the case of Adam, which is the case that we need, from the case of Adam, and not learn the case of Adam from Behema. Hainu de Katane, and since that's true, we have an Imnafshech Loma. Since there's a possibility that we wouldn't learn the case of Adam Mazik Adam from the case of Adam Mazik Behema because it has a weakness that it's talking about a Behema, and we could have had the possibility to say, wait a minute, it's more logical to learn our case from the case of Adam, even though he's a Rotzeach. That's why the Tana brought his second Gezer Sakasa, because there's a weakness here. Yes, you can answer 100%. Please ask.
When the Gemara asks a kasha on this possible teretz, you say dam in nazikim and nazikin, they ain't dam nazikim and lisa. So what changed between that and then suddenly cause us to say Adarabba? Well, obviously you haven't even knew Adarabba. We already knew that there was obviously we knew the pasuk Adam and ain't done Adam Behema. What's
to say the Gemara is spelling out the significant factor, okay? That's what it's doing over here in the Adarabba. It's showing you it's not so simple. You wanted to say that it's obvious that you should learn Adam HaMazik, in our case, he knows with man, from the case of Adam HaMazik in Behema, correct? So now the Gemara, and it seems that there's no other, the Gemara is saying that's, or the person who's the Makshin is saying, there's no other possibility. So he's pointing out now, the Tartzin, is that there is a Shaila here. It's not so simple. You're correct. You would want to, that's why the Tana brought it, but it's not glut, because there is a possibility that you can learn from Adam, even though he's a Rotzeich, because it's better on one hand. So he is spelling out, in other words, I hope I'm being clear, at first glance, it looks Peshita that you shouldn't learn from Rotzeich.
right?
Okay, you should only learn from Adam. So the person who's on the defense has to now spell out what why the Havamina that he's presenting, that learning from Adam, has validity. So he's spelling it out by saying, what's the advantages of learning Adam? Now, if you're going to ask me why the Havamina the Maskana, that far I'm not going to get involved in. I'm just trying to demonstrate that he is changing the Peshita to its Saricha, and to showing you the advantage of the other case. Okay?
I was going to do
okay.
I'm sorry.
Is that okay? Yeah? I'm sorry?
Perfect.
Nelson?
Yeah.
We're together.
Yes.
Okay, great. So you have to know the players. It's very important to know the players because it's very easy to get confused in a complicated shakla attire like this. And it's easy to just skip over it and to say, well, it's just one long question. To see that it's actually a restating of a difficulty, a kasha on that restatement, and a teretz is something that requires thought. I mean, I sat down, I actually had to think about it. It's not something that you could just see right away. And if you do, you just skip over steps. So now the Ramchal is going to spell it out, okay? I just said it outside because the Ramchal of course expects you to go and look at the text itself. But this is how we spells it out. Okay? Umayim nafshecha lomar. Hey shiv, you see, you said correctly. Hey shiv is what? What's that Hey shiv lashon? Hey shiv is lashon of a tshuva, right? So as you said, there was a shela. What was bothering the Tana? Mayim nafshecha lomar. What was the tshuva? Sukkah kasha. Right? This was the kasha, and it was presented. Why learn from the damage of an animal? Learn from the man murdering. V'hine kusha mugeres, says the Ramchal. Shehigid hamagid shahatana hirgish kusha zeh al divrei atzmo. It's a retelling of what the kasha was what kasha the Tana had on his own words, right? Because he's presenting a proof. He's saying, but I have, of course, have a kasha on the 6. The hikshu, and the Ramchal spells it out beautifully. Now there's a kasha on that kasha mugedes. And it's really saying, hey, come on, the Tana could never have this problem. Why? Amre. Because Dana Nezikin mean Nezikin, being Dana Nezikin Misa. What is a crazy possibility you're giving? Of course we're going to learn the case of damaging from damaging, even though one is talking about the case we need is damaging man, and that's what's damaging the animal, but it's both talking about damaging it. We wouldn't learn from the case of Misa, the case of a man damaging a person, the case of Misa. Hine, he kusha al hagaras hamagid. This is a kasha on the person who reconstructed the kasha of the Tana. He's saying, the Maksha is saying, this cannot be the kasha that the Tana had, like you're trying to explain. Okay, so it's a very important thing when you're in a Chakravartari to keep track of the players. Who's the Baal Mamar? Who's the Makshin? Who's the Makshin on the Makshin? Is the Makshin on the Makshin? Is the Makshin on the Baal Mamar? And that's the only way you'll get to the true debate that's going on. Okay. ובכל דברים האלו צריך שתשומר מאוד כדי שתנקה מן הטעוס והערבובים. All these things that I just taught you, you have to be very, very careful so you don't make mistakes and you don't mix things up. You don't mix the Makshin with the Tarts and the Tarts with the Baal Mamar. That's it. Now, והנה, אחר שהסבת כוונת הסוגיה אשר לפניך, על פי כל הכללים האלו, after you've done everything that I said, אז תשוב להזמונן על כל חלק מחלקהו. Then go back and think about each one of the steps in the Chakravartari. ואם יראה אליך שכולם עומדים בגבולים הראויים על פי המשפטים הטבעיים שזכרנו למעלה, if they all now fit very nicely according to the laws that I brought above, הנה טוב מאוד, that's great. ואם יראה לך בחלק מחלקהו שלא שומע הגבול הראוי, but if you see something that's not following the rules, אז תטרח ותאמר עד שתמצא לו היישוב ההוגן והראוי. Then you better put on your working clothes and work real hard until you straighten out the misperception in your understanding. Sheyaskim, in the end, everything has to yaskim im haloshin shelefanecha, v'yaskim im hamamar o ha-mefursam. However you set up the logic tree, it better agree with the language that's being used. Make sure you're not having something sloppy or fuzzy or crowbarring something into the words, okay? And make sure that every step really agrees with, is really true. You've gone down to all the proofs of the proofs of the proofs until you've gotten to ground level muskalim or mukhashim or mufarsim or mukubalim, as you know, if it's a pasuk, you got down to the baseline, and make sure that everything fits. Okay, if it doesn't, you have work to do. Okay, that's the end of chapter 10. Okay, there's a lot here, needless to say. Every little step is actually very, very clear and logical, but one has to work to master all the little steps. And when you do that and apply it, so then you get the step of clarity and truth, which is really what we're at. We're not out to cover 3,000 plus pages and get a fuzzy idea of what's going on. We're trying to get a clear idea of what's going on. And the Ramchal has presented a very powerful tool where he's given us all the What he claims is all the possibilities. Possibilities of statements, possibilities of vacation, possibilities of basis of proof, which is quite a remarkable accomplishment. Let's, in the time remaining, we have a few minutes, go to a practical example. Okay? Here's our little case. We've done the Mishnah. Let's go into the Gemara. Okay? The Mishnah we know, we've done it many times, says that there's 4 types of Nazikin. It says the word Arba Avos Nazikin. There are 4 principal categories of Nazikin. Let's put on that, and on here on the right-hand side, I have all this is an old version. Okay, I'm going to leave it this way because I don't want to take the time to switch it. Okay, I fixed up the icons in the newer version. Yeah, let's go. Let's look at the Gemara. Okay, the Gemara says the following. It does not say this great word, Arba Avos Nazikin, but from the context we know that that's what it's going to be talking about. It makes the following move. Mida Katani Avos, Miklal Be'iga Todos. That's the first move. So if I would ask you, what is the subject of that statement and what is the predicate? Okay? It's up to you now.
Okay, so I'm going to think about this one.
You sure do. You sure do. Okay? How would you translate the statement in common English?
Since we learned in the Mishnah that they're avos, there's an inference that there must be toldos.
Right. Right.
So then the subject would be avos.
Yeah.
Right? The subject would be the fact that we learned avos.
That's correct. Very good. Yes, that's the subject. And what are we saying about that?
And about the avos, that there is a
Must be told us.
Yeah, what Nassan, you want to help him out? Yeah?
Yeah.
That there must be told us.
Right. So what, in the 11 types of statements, which type of statement is this? Now, I don't want you to tell me what the function of the statement is. I want to tell you what of the 11 types of statements is this. Is it a simple statement? Is it an key statement?
I mean, of the predicates, of the nasu.
Yeah, the predicate. Which one of the predicates is it? Yeah, which one? What type of predication is this?
Let's see.
Yeah.
I don't know. Let's go through the list. Let's see. It's not a stam.
Nassan, you have any ideas?
I think lefichach lechoyer, but I wanna check that out.
Nassan, I see you're on the ball.
Yeah.
You hear what he says?
Yeah, so I have to look back. I was going to review today the 11
Yeah.
predicates,
Go review. That's exactly why I'm doing this, because
right.
if you don't do this, you don't force yourself to do this painful work, then you don't really get the benefit of the book.
Right.
And then you don't see the depth of what's going on. But good, let's go.
Right. So let's see what a lefichach is. I'm going to look it up.
Okay.
And we'll read what lefichach is, see if it fits. I can't find it. Get down. How come I can't find it?
Yakupara Tekasach has been listening in the car. I'm trying to follow along the audio only. You're trying to do Talmud to Yitzhak, and the question is.
The question is, the statement is Nida Katani Avos Miklal De'ika Toldos. From the fact that we learned the words Avos, therefore we can infer there are Toldos. I want to know which one of the 11 types of predication are we talking about here? So Nassan said he's checking out Lefikach. Okay.
I think the third it's Nimshach.
Oh, Nimshach. Yeah. And yeah, that's on page 39 of the Sefer. Okay. And you want to spell that out, Nassan?
Yeah, meaning the fichach, understanding that it means like because of this, therefore this must be true. Because of A, therefore B must be true. So we're saying because there are avos, it must be true that there are also toldos.
This week you go to the front of the class. How's that, Avi? You agree with
That's
me?
great. Yeah.
I already gave it away, but I think Nassan said it very beautifully.
Right.
Right? The fikach, right? Now I'll ask you.
In the Sefer, he calls it a nimshach. Not a
What's the
lefichach.
nimshach? Oh yeah, he calls it nishim. I'm sorry.
And in your chart, in the chart, you call it a lefichach.
Yeah, because
And the Sefer, it's called a nimshach.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good one. Oh boy, no, I didn't notice that. Yeah, we keep calling it lefikach because it's a good key word, but he actually does he give a name for it in the Sefer?
Well, in the Sefer, if you read Haminach Harasser, it says sheyemer by nasu nimshach.
Yeah, but he doesn't give it a name. Usually he says a name, right? In the Sefer,
Derech
right?
Mashal.
Here he didn't give a name. Okay.
And his mashal here is Ivan Bashuk.
No, you're right. Okay, we can call it a nimshach. That's fine.
Okay,
Nimshach
so
is
in
fine.
the chart will change it. And so he says in here in the book, Derech Mashal Ivan Bashuk, Vamatulu Lachem Te'enim, Eichlem Upeturim, Lefichach, and Mechnisu, Lebateim, Mesakrin Vadai. So that's
here,
it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, so that's the end. That's the end of
With these. Yeah. What's interesting here, and that's what I'm sort of forcing you to do, is recast what you see in front of you into one of these 11. You
Right.
see? And that's the job, because you have to understand what the words mean, and you have to then put it into one of these forms. Okay? And that's the work, because most people just want to read and go ahead. And it's a very, very, very critical work, because now I'm going to ask you the second part.
okay.
I'm going to ask you, what is the function of this statement? Now we know this is lefikach, but what is it doing here?
So it's a it would probably be a memra. What did you say? What did you say, Nathan?
I think the it's a memra.
It's a memra. Yeah, I was gonna say it's a memra that's a mafarish.
You agree, Nasa?
I'm leaning towards diuk, but I want to check that out again.
Oh, I forgot about diuk. It could be more of a diuk. That would be more appropriate, probably.
Meaning, because we're inferring from the purpose is to make a statement. Now we know avos, and from that we're inferring toldos, and then based on the toldos, we're going to then ask a kasha.
No, you're too fast. You're too fast.
I would agree with
The
that.
fact it's going to ask a kasha we're going to have to discuss that, but we didn't even see the statement yet.
But the fact that it makes this diuk, I would think before it's a memra, it's a diuk.
You call it a
The main
memra,
function
right?
is to establish that there are toldos.
So now I'm going to give you my opinion. This is actually a proof. This is actually a raya. It's a hochacha. How does that work?
Okay, let's we gotta look that up. How does that work?
I maintain this is a raya. It's a hochacha. Was it trying to prove?
that there are tolders.
That's right. That's what it's trying to prove. How is it trying to prove it?
Based on the dig from the fact that there's avos.
Yes.
Ah,
It's a halacha based on a deal from the fact that there's avos. You hear that?
Yep, yeah. That
Now,
makes,
this is very, I want to tell you how significant this is. This is outside information that you don't know because you didn't learn the Mishnah and the Gemara. All throughout the Mishnah, it never tells you what the Todos are. Our Mishnah never spells out any of the Todos. The Gemara is going to bring brises that talk about the Todos. And later on, we're going to see in the Gemara that Reb Chia and Reb Oshia even disagree on how many avos they are. The Gemara makes the same deal and says, wait a minute, there's certain avos here that Reb Oshia and Chia have that don't have Todos, like Motzi Shemra. So it says, oh, that's because avos is being used, meaning only things that are written in the Torah. So what I'm trying to bring up is the first move of the Gemara has to prove that there's Todos before it can do anything else. Before it can do anything else. And this is a debatable point, okay? But that's beautiful. When you analyze this properly, you'll see that it's a lefikach statement. That's what it is. This, therefore, that. But why do I need a therefore? The function is to prove that there is, in fact, Todos. Now, once we proved it, now we'll go on to ask if the pro-Todos are like the not like the all through Derek Tefunos. Without Derek Tefunos, you would not slow down. You would not have the kalim, the possibilities, and you wouldn't even be thinking like this. Unless, okay, if you're if you're a golem, maybe you would. But the beauty of Derek Tefunos is it forces just a normal person to ask the questions and to reveal the depth of what's going on here. Okay, so I threw in outside information. Yeah, but that's only paparos. That was only to, sweeten what we just did. But there's no doubt about it that the Gemara here first has to prove this told us, and it does it through a diuk. Okay. I would then, okay. I think this is a good place to stop, even though we have a few minutes left. I would ask you, no matter what Gemara you're doing, do these two steps. Stop. Which one of the 11 statements are being said? Step 2, what's the function of what's being said? That's all. Later, we'll spell out all the steps if it has multiple steps, okay? This, by the way, had really one step. It was the diuk. The proof that this Todos came from a diuk in the Mishnah. I'd ask you also, if we have a few minutes, the Ramchal told us that there's certain foundations of proof. Which one of the types of proof is this diuk? Is it you hear what I'm saying? Now you have to go back and remember all the different types of proofs, right?
Yeah, well,
but that's what you have to do. So see, which type of proof is this? Have we gotten to the ground floor or not?
okay. So whether it's a heichach or a raya.
No.
Heichach or a.
In the chapter,
yeah.
in the chapter where he told us things are true or false based on, it's chapter 8, based on either if they come from teva.
Oh, that one. Okay. Right.
Yeah, that one. So which one of these? Which type of proof is this? Is this a hekesh? Is this a maforsam? What type of proof is this? You hear what I'm asking? Nothing.
Yes, I'm looking at it right now.
Very good. Very good.
I would be inclined to say it's not a hekesh because it seems to be common sense that if there's obvious, it must be told us.
Hold on. So what does that have to do with a hekesh? You want to make a hekesh? You can
No,
make a
I mean,
hekesh.
the proof of convention.
One,
How about you'd have to go back and know how you know there are avos.
The Mishnah says.
no, the diuk I'm asking. If the proof here comes from a diuk of the Mishnah.
Right.
Okay, let's be very clear. The proof comes from the fact that the Mishnah used the word avos. We can prove that there must be told us. What type of proof is that?
I think Mitzad has common and Meforsam.
Why has come in before some?
Because if there are avos, that common sense implies that there must be told us.
So why is that called meforsam? Meforsam is stuff that everybody, that people agree.
Oh, I hear you're right. You're right.
I know what are all the choices? I was looking at this again. This is
Okay.
I mean,
So
just
now-
going through the choices you have here.
You got-
Mitzad Teva, Muskalis, Rishonis.
Yeah. Here we go.
Haskama.
I'll put this on the screen for you guys.
Oh,
I
that's
should
a
do
good
this
idea.
actually. That would help.
Right.
Okay, there we go. Okay, so we said there's Teva, Haskama, and Hekesh. Those are the three basic boxes. Okay? Teva, we said there's two types, Muskalos Rishonas and Muchashos. Haskama, we said Meforsamas and Mukubalos. And Hekeshim, we know all the Hekeshim. Okay? So, what is this?
It would have to be Teva then. Because if you know that there are avos, then logic tells you that there are toldos.
What type of Teva?
Muskalis, Rishonim.
That's correct. Inherent in the structure of language, if you use the term av, you must imply Torah. That's a muskal rishon. It's like two is greater than one. The word av by teva implies Torah. So it's a muskal rishon. It's not before some because there's no Kabbalah here and there's no general agreement, and it's not a hekesh. It's mamish and it's not teva. It's not muchash. You don't feel it, sense it. It's a muskal rishon. Okay.
All right. Gets interesting.
Okay. And now when we know, why did I force you to this point? Because we have to get to the ground floor. That's what the Ramchal always tells you to do. You have to get to Muskal Rishon. You can't go any further. You say that's the terrible language. What do you want me to do? Now you can say he's talking Lav Dafka and all sorts of things, but then you're giving a perishtochuk there. Okay, doesn't mean you're wrong, but the simple teva of language is that the word av implies Torah. That's a Muskal Rishon. You don't have to go any further than that, and that's my right. Okay. Now, if you noticed, I'm going to tell you something. In diukim, he had two types of diukim. Okay? Let's go here, and we'll go to, that's why this book is pretty good too. The way I did it, I have the
Hyperlinks.
I have the hyperlinks, almost all of them. I didn't do all of them. No, I didn't do the diukim, I don't think. Ugh, too bad. No, I didn't do all the hyperlinks. I had some of them. But in diukim, he described two types of diukim. Okay, he described diukim which are muchrachim and diukim that are built in muchrachim. and these are the ones that are built in muchrachim because you see here he said two types of diukim. The built in muchrachim, he says tolri bediktuk seda hamilos v'yachasan. You see that word? That's the yachas. The word av has a yachas. Shaf al pi shetachilas is bonus nosenish nitchehu kfar yochel himself. You can find a way when it comes to a word like avos, which is used as a, you're making it because you're saying al pi seichel, al pi muskal rishon. The word av has a yachas to the word told, and therefore there must be tolas. But he warns you that you could find a way to push off this basic meaning and to say lav dafka. And it's actually, again, just having fun, the Gemara later on, as I mentioned, does say, hey, there's this word avos being used for things like Moshe Sema doesn't have told us. So what did he do? The answer is he used the secondary meaning of the word av. Okay? So what you gain here is the primary meaning of the word av means told us. But since it's a diuk that's bilti mukrach, that means you can find a way to push it out of its primary meaning. And the Gemara actually does for those other cases. Anyway, that's the exciting part of learning this book. It's going to take time to get used to it and time to force yourself, or I'll have to force yourself. Maybe we'll have to take time together. But if you don't force yourself to say what is the statement, which one of the 11, and what is the function, then the book stays on the bookshelf in terms of theory, and it never comes into practical reality. And once you put it in practical reality, you gain the real benefits of the sefer. Okay, I think we'll stop here, and we'll start our second session, B'ezras Hashem. So, Avi, maybe we can close off and come back in. Nasan, what we're doing is we're going to